I'm going to go into speaker view because there's quite a lot of videos there. Okay, all right. Let me just do this for a minute because I can do that from another screen, I suppose. In my abstract, I talked about teenagers being challenging, difficult, and so on. But I just wanted to highlight the fact that I'm talking about different ways of maximizing their absolutely marvelous potential for learning. They have been identified as prime subjects for massive vocabulary acquisition and for enhanced language learning. And I want to go through some of these steps and give you a couple of practical ideas, if I may, although there were so many rich ideas that I could have included from other speakers in this talk. Let's begin asking a question. And the question is, how do you feel? What are the words that come to mind when thinking teenagers? I ask you to go out of this room to type up. In a previous presentation that I saw earlier today, one of the colleagues put up this question, and here are this is a fun slide that I wanted to show you. This is a really nice image that has been going around Facebook, and we all had a good laugh about it. And this is an elementary school online class, and everybody's doing something else. The teacher is just struggling to get everybody's attention. Somebody's chair has fallen over. And then in the next picture, we see a group of secondary school learners who are just sitting there mute and without saying anything, and the teacher is just struggling to get them to say something. So who are our teenage learners? And I'm just not going to go into the term young adults, but I'm talking about the age group between 13, 14 up to 17. It's a great picture, wasn't it, Maylen? And here are some words that I found in text, but what do you think? The teacher is lucky. Yeah. Can you write some words that you associate with teenagers, please, very quickly? Challenging. Moody. Stroppy. Impulsive. Fun to work with. Creative, arrogant. Think sometimes they know everything. Unruly, disruptive, curious. Angsty, imaginative. Moody, buffering. Young adults. Not so interested, promising, challenging. Well, a scroll through the internet revealed some of these words that you've already mentioned. Some people call them half-grown, unaccountably shy, incredibly gawky, volatile, passionate, sure, lanky, bony, still cute, self-conscious, surly, rambunctious, precocious, naturally vigorous and combative, lean and vehement. I don't know, all these dumb, gangly, moody. I don't know. I was very intrigued by the word bloodthirsty. I don't know if you've heard if you have any bloodthirsty teenagers in your classes. And here is the slide that from Mentimeter, colleague who did a talk earlier, got from you. Teaching teens, you said, is challenging. This was the most important word, apparently, from this word cloud. But rewarding, that's another big word. That means a lot of you find it rewarding. And then you had exciting, fun, thought-provoking, frustrating. That's quite big as well. A lot of people find it frustrating as well. Well, how do you find it? Do you find it frustrating? Would you go into frustrating or rewarding, challenging or difficult? What do you think? Can you type a word that you associate most? Which of the big words would you? Rewarding. Okay, that's good. So who are our teenage learners? According to Jean Piaget, whom I'm sure all the members of the Young Learners SIG will know very well, he calls the age of those of that I'm talking about, the formal operational stage. Remember the other stages, the pre-operational, concrete operational, and so on. The teenagers, they go into a stage where they can begin to develop abstract thought. They can begin to have a sense of self and how they learn, and to begin to be able to have some control over their own learning. This is the meta function. And they are able to begin to problem solve. However, the age range between 13 and 17 is quite wide. It's quite a wide age gap. And so if we look at the continuum between the 13, 14-year-old, because I define 14-year-olds in my abstract, if I may limit myself to that age group. But still, at the beginning of that age group, the concrete operational, they're not able to do all this very well. They are beginning, so they're going through a lot of developmental stages. And by the end of 12 and up, they might be able to begin to process and produce abstract thought, to be self-aware and handle their own learning and solve problems or be challenged by problem solving. Jean Piaget himself says that the 12-year-old boundary could be up or down a year, because some of the children's below the age of 12, maybe more mature, and some of them at the age of 13 or 12 may be less mature. So there's a little bit of seeping both ways at that age boundary. If we look at some of the key words again that people say about them, they're emotional. I've heard other speakers call about hormonal changes, about a lot of different physiological changes in their body, their emotions. They're beginning to be interested in the other sex, whatever sex that is. They are worried, they are inhibited, they're great risk takers. And one of the reasons they're great risk takers is because the prefrontal cortex, which controls the sense of safety and being aware of what to do, not to do that involves a risk, is still developing. For example, they're not afraid to say, the reason they are not afraid to say anything, or they're just spew everything that pops into their head, is because they're not aware that there are some things that they must keep to themselves. That, of course, to be quite honest with you, there are a lot of adults who haven't developed that particular brain function, and they will say anything that pops into their head as well. They tend to be inhibited and very much pressured by peers and by the viewpoints, the impressions that they give to others. So very often they lack, the courage to speak in class, and some of the things are very, very important for a language class. I want to go to the second area that I'm interested in, good learner studies. And I found a very good summary in Stern's book, Fundamental Concepts of Language Teaching. It's quite an old publication, but he has really good summaries. And what he says, I'm not going to read this out to you because you can very well read yourselves. He talks about the good language learners and how motivated they are, analytical, they tolerate ambiguity, they're good risk takers, they are not afraid of appearing foolish, which maybe our teenage learners might find problematic because they are inhibited. They're adaptable, good listeners, high achievers, and also good teammates. They can adjust very well to any kind of class situation. They're not pressured or anxious about learning a foreign language. They don't feel shy or inhibited, and so on. And finally, the last one, if you look down, scroll down, they will usually be adolescents or adults rather than children. And this has come across many different studies of good language learners. And I was intrigued by that because it looks like they're potentially kind of what I call learning machines, but still they lack some of the other good characteristics that good language learners seem to display. For example, lack of inhibition, lack of concern about appearing foolish and being, and saying whatever. So they are a mixture, and there are some, I think the word somebody put up there that I loved was baffling, because there's so much that's good, but also so much that is confusing in their own developmental makeup. And I think that really poses a great challenge to language teachers. So I'm going to talk about maybe a couple of practical examples about the meta function, metacognition. And I think some of the suggestions of psychologists who have been studying this age group suggests that we should help the learners in order to help them be more effective learners. We should help them to develop more self-awareness, and particularly the sense of self-awareness of whether they are good learners. I think good language learner studies suggest that people are kind of naturally good language learners, but my own view about these studies is that whatever we learn from good language learners, we could teach people who are learning to be better learners themselves. I think any educator is possibly convinced that they can affect some kind of change. So because I am in the business of change, I think even people who begin by not being very good language learners, they can be taught to be, or helped to see how they could become better language learners. I think the second suggestion is to help them monitor their own thinking and perhaps start considering how can I become a good language learner? So first of all, am I one? If I'm not, how can I become one? And second, lastly, developing strategies for learning, which is quite an important function of language teachers. We're just not walking dictionaries and grammars, transmitting content. We educate, we help our learners become more self-aware, to develop learning strategies, to develop strategies for processing or producing language. And that last one is, how can I learn, I think, without my teacher? I don't know if you agree with this last one. Would you care to write a comment in the text chat for me? Do you agree with the fact that one of our important aims as educators is to make them, thank you, Julie and Anna and Milena, to build autonomy? I think for me, this is the ultimate goal of every educator, if you were to ask me what is my role in life, is to make my learners not need me, not have any need for me. So that's what I want to do. I don't want to turn to good citizens. I don't want them to turn them into Christians or Muslims or politically correct individuals. I want to turn them into people who can think for themselves and who can learn without needing me. Yes, absolutely. So some suggested classroom activities for this aspect of developing learners' awareness. Maybe a mini lecture about good learner traits. It could be part of a listening lesson. You could record something, you could record a conversation, or you could give them a text, because the learners need to be aware. Well, what is it that good language learners do? Maybe you could give them H.E. Stern's list of learner characteristics as a reading lesson, do activities with it. I think it's important for teacher to ask questions about good learner skills, good learner traits after learners finish an activity, because things like, how did you approach it? Did you use the technique I suggested? Do you remember what we said about dealing with unknown vocabulary or memorizing words or whatever it is that you are working on? You could ask the learners to collaborate, then that gives them more a sense of choice and autonomy, and to work out some ways of helping themselves and each other to develop these good qualities. Some of them will have tricks that they can teach others. Some of them will do something better in a more effective way. They could share the strategy. I think it's also quite important to show interest in an individual's progress, because, and in group progress, and I would suggest the magic of individual tutorials. I call them super learning clinic. The doctor is in, put a sign up. So how are you doing? How are you how are you progressing? Are you doing better? You remember we talked about, how you couldn't, you went into panic if you saw an unknown word in a text. Blah, blah, blah. How are you dealing with that? And also, I think maybe it would be a good idea to introduce post-activity reflections. What worked and what didn't, and how can we fix it? And I think, if I may make this comment, I think we don't pay enough attention to failure. I think we pay a lot of attention to success. So where did you find the answer? So what helped you find the answer is a question that I very often ask teachers, watch teachers ask learners. Very rarely. So what was it that confused you? How did you approach the task? What didn't work for you? How can we do it better? Here is an example, perhaps, at B1 plus minus level of giving them a strategy. So this is something that I observed, and I helped a trainee develop the materials, who gave them a very, very difficult text. And some of the words were very difficult medical terms. And I have highlighted some of the medical terminology. And he gave them a set of strategies for dealing with unknown lexes. For example, by guessing the meaning, by understanding the logical connection between the ideas in a text. Connections such as equivalence, contrast, from general to specific, purpose, and so on. You can find all these in maybe in Françoise Grelet's book on reading skills in a foreign language. And then give them a new text to apply the strategy. And I've watched learners handle really, really pesky texts like this. They understood the terms, even if they couldn't articulate the logical connection between the terms that help them. this was the beginning of getting to think about connections of words with one another in the text. In other words, the cohesive elements of the text that help you understand elements of text. I think it's also quite important, another aspect, to deal with the emotional and inhibitive factors of being in a group of peers who may exercise pressure on you, is to introduce quite a few team building activities. I think it's true that teenagers need challenge, they need to be motivated, but they also need to feel safe. And I would very much recommend my forgot the J, and I know the lady, I'm sorry, Hadfield's Classroom Dynamics, which is all but, it's one of my 10 desert island books that I would, Jill, thank you. I think the brain has stopped. Yeah. I think also it's a good idea to try some alternative methods, such as don't just go into PPP and communicative language teaching. Try out other things like Suggestopedia, community counseling learning, try Dogby, try task-based language teaching. I'm not saying that every single one of these methods will work with your own learners. Not all methods travel well from country to country, from culture to culture. But unless you experiment, you're not going to learn which one works with your learners and which ones will challenge them. And I think that's quite important. In terms of vocabulary acquisition, and particularly the concept of masses and massive vocabulary acquisition, I want to mention a research. If anybody's interested in the paper where this appeared, please email me. But Paul Mira did this research quite a few years ago and discovered that teenagers can acquire, at their peak, at the age of 16, can acquire up to 60 words a day. Of course, these 60 words a day may not all be in the foreign language. Some of them will be in their mother tongue because they're going to school and they're acquiring concepts in their mother tongue as well. So don't think, oh yeah, I'll crank it up, I'll give them 60 words a day. It's not possible because they're also acquiring a lot of new vocabulary at school. So, but it's the limit, which some people suggest 5-8 words is the limit, doesn't seem to be realistic for that age group. They can take in a lot more. I call them learning machines. I used that word earlier, but they can switch off very easily if they're bored or peer pressure. And I remember myself as a very unruly teenager that I would not wish in anyone's class. I was a terror, a true terror, but I'm an expert on boredom and being a surly teenager. Most of the time I was unruly and very naughty because I was bored. I could even finish the teacher's sentences. I knew so well, they were so predictable. So be unpredictable, be creative, give them things to do that are new, that, they don't expect from you. Learners love teachers whose lessons are full of surprises. I know that for sure. Here's a little example of maybe, I don't know if I have time to show it to you. Let me just check the time. Maybe it's 1 minute only. You can find for Suggestopedia, which is a method that uses music, and particularly music at 60 megacycles per second, which is like New Age, Vangelis, Baroque music also. Give them stories to listen to, and maybe with a background of music or something like that, and get them to listen to the stories again and again, and maybe to repeat the stories word for word. Here is one that I found. in StoryCorps, where people tell their own stories. This one was lovely because it was also animated. And I could show you different images from this story, and I could get the learners to brainstorm what happens in the story and to give the learners the opportunity to brainstorm ideas. And I'm doing that very quickly, obviously not in real class time. And then after they've brainstormed and they suggested what would be in the story, I could go to the beginning and play the story a little bit with music.
The conditions were pretty terrible. I once told someone that I learned to fight with a knife long before I learned how to ride a bicycle. And when you are grinding day after day after day, there is no room in you for hope. You don't even know it exists. There's nothing to aspire to except filling your hungry belly. That's how I was raised. When I was 12, a bookmobile came to the fields.
Now, in the method, in Suggestopedia, this story would be translated, but I don't necessarily want to use Suggestopedia as it was originally created, in the sense that Lozanov would give lists of words with their translations, or he would recount a story with the music, but also translate the story. I would just go through my normal lesson, do the necessary, some lead-in activity, brainstorming, etc. And then I might replay the story with some music and have the learners listen to it. For example, like this. I think everyone is more concerned with the certificates at the moment.
The conditions were pretty terrible. I once told someone that I learned to fight with a knife long before I learned how to ride a bicycle. And
so I would replay the story a couple of times, the first time without music, the second time with music, the third time I would replay maybe the images and get the learners to retell the story until they learned the story. This is a technique that we used, and I have a couple of links that you could actually click on and find. There's a really great Suggestopedia lesson that I found online, and a Suggestopedia lesson and essay that I'm sharing on our Delta blog from one of my trainees who I egged on, and she did this, and it was such a huge success that I recorded it and I put it on our blog. Subsequent to that lesson, which I was very impressed with, the learners learned a very difficult text with a lot of, I don't think so. If there's a password, I'll clear it. Just keep the link for the moment, okay? Because I cannot attend to passwords right now. Subsequent to that, all right. Okay, I shouldn't be watching the text chat because it's a little bit distracting because people are asking for certificates. I'm sorry. Subsequent to that, and seeing the success that this activity had in getting the learners to learn a very difficult text almost by heart and enjoying the retelling and massively acquiring language, not just individual words, but words in context, narrating. We use the technique even with business students who we got to narrate, to repeat, to learn, to dramatize and rehearse texts that had to do with business, with their topic, with very difficult finance vocabulary, and that worked there as well. So I think that's worth trying. I think if I may connect ideas to the well-known Bloom's taxonomy, which this is the amended taxonomy, obviously. A lot of math acquisition activities have to do with remembering, first of all, and we have to find ways of getting the learners to recall, to memorize vocabulary. But that's not the whole story. In order for them to acquire language, they have to understand it, they have to use it, they have to possibly analyze it, and they have to create new language by using this language. So acquisition is not just recall, learning lists of words, memorizing lists. So Suggestopedia is just one tool. I'm not suggesting that you should do that in every lesson, but also do a lot of creative and critical thinking activities for your learners, such as, for example, brainstorming, a very creative activity on as many unusual uses of chair as you can think of. So, for example, learners in team can brainstorm activities, what you can do with a chair that is unusual. And if it's normal and ordinary, you don't accept it. And you can bring in simple objects, for example, a paper clip, a mug, to get the learners to brainstorm and use a lot of language creatively. Creativity in general thrives within constraints and benefits from the paradox. And I'm very fond of using activities that trigger the paradox and the unusual, because teenagers, as I remember myself, I was more interested in stuff that was crazy, that was paradoxical, than in the normal, because it's funny. So activities that, getting them to do back and forth. I love rock and roll. No, but it's not really as good as traditional music. Yes, but rock and roll is more dynamic, it's more energetic, and the other team could be giving the opposite arguments. Or they could be working with the yes and concept. I love rock and roll. Yes. Let's organize a concert and so on. There's lots of ideas like that in a book that I have linked at the end. And exploiting the paradox could also be a good one. This is a typical causative use of have activity, where the learners would say, oh, you could have your hair cut at the hairdressers. They're not very excited about anything like that. Teenagers love crazy stuff like this. You can have what? No, let's not do something. You can have your feet enlarged at the hairdressers. So get them to write crazy sentences that don't make sense. Get them to write crazy questions that don't have answers. Get them to find their way out of troublesome situations by creating a very good reason like this. And after you try that, then get them to write predicaments to send to another group and challenge them. So these are some from my creative activities. Also, give them the ability to evaluate. There's a very good tool online, which is called a tri-sider, and you can use that online if you're teaching online, where you put an idea down and then people go and say the pros of the idea and the points against the idea. But if you think this is difficult, you can put it on the wall of your classroom. Put the idea here, and then people take a red piece of paper and they write an advantage, the pros. If they take a blue piece of paper and they write something that's against the idea. So they can just do it on the wall of the class with paper, or they can do it on your interactive whiteboard. They can use red ink, red color font for pros, and blue color font for ideas against. The last idea here, it's very, very nice, yes. Thank you, Sophia. I've used this as well. It's just to remember the task cycle, task-based language teaching, Well, you don't present, but first of all, you ask the learners to produce. And second, maybe they read and listen to how people do it in the real world. They understand, maybe you can clarify, and then they produce some more. So first they try it out, the challenge, then they see how it's done and they check, compare their own version, and then they try again, which is task repetition. And here I'm going to use the same text, which is a very silly little text, but it's very useful, where you can, you give them this image and you say, this is a story that happened. And I'll give you you can ask as many yes or no questions, and I'll answer them all. Once you answer the questions, you say to the learners, go and write the story, or go and prepare the story orally. Or you ask them to ask many related questions, to brainstorm questions that they would ask. And then you give them something to write. And get them to publish it in folly.com, and it looks like a newspaper. So this is something that the learners might produce. And then finally, you give them the actual text. This is the text. But instead of doing comprehension work, ask them to write unrelated questions. You win a point if the text does not answer the question. This is the paradoxical, the funny, the unexpected. And so they can say a 3-month-old boy. So what was the boy's name? What was the make of the father's car? What was the dad's name? But landed upright. Well, what color clothes was the baby wearing? His portable car seat. What make was the car seat? And so on. Teenagers love that kind of silly questioning. And then you can ask them to rewrite the story, adding the information. This is in Etherpad, but you can also do it in Google Docs, or if they have bits of paper in front of them, they can do it on a big sheet of paper. The last thing that I want to say, because I think it's time is coming up for me to stop, multiple perspectives. And I like the idea of 6 thinking hats, which is maybe how many of you are familiar with the 6 thinking hats of Edward de Bono? Is anyone familiar with them? Well, the 6 thinking hats are different perspectives. So if you're wearing the white hat, you pay attention to data, to facts, to information. If you're given the red hat to wear, and it could be a red bandana or a red label on your shirt, you pay attention to feelings, to hunches, instinct, intuition. If you're wearing the black hat, you troubleshoot. You think about potential problems, where something may not work. You are the Grinch. If you're wearing the yellow hat, you talk about general issues, values, benefits, why something may work. The blue hat is the process hat, the next step. So what is, for example, if we look at the story with the baby that fell off the roof, the white hat would pay attention to the dad, the age of the baby, the fact that the baby remained on the hat for 3 miles. The red hat would concentrate on the feelings. How did the father feel when he realized this? How did the people behind feel when they saw a baby on the roof of a car? The black hat would think about, that baby could have died. The car behind could have flattened that poor baby. The yellow hat may think, this will be a lesson for the father. And next time he will pay a lot of attention not to leave the baby on the top of the car, on the roof of the car. I like this idea because it's an alternative reading activity. It's an alternative information processing activity, and it can lead to great discussions, debates, and so on, and gives your learners the opportunity to think in multiple perspectives. Finally, some improvisation never hurt anybody, particularly with boring exercises from the course book, of the kind that you see here, where there are gaps, and the learner has to say whether the word convinced or convincing should go in the gap. Sometimes it's a good idea to give them these sentences and to tell them to improvise a dialogue. And I used that with some teens some time ago. It's quite a long time ago, actually, but I recall it because they loved it. And they had to reinvent a conversation in which one of them used one phrase and the other replied with the other phrase. They were free to decide who they were, where they were, what they were talking about, and what was happening to them. And we heard people in front of a television, a couple that was about to get a divorce, a boring grandfather that was telling them a story, and yet again about his youth and so on. And the teenagers didn't have anything to base on, but they generated the context. And I think if I may say, language is acquired when you encounter it in meaningful ways. And if your book doesn't provide meaningful ways, allow the learners to provide the meaning and build the context around the language that otherwise slips away and is totally forgotten 5 minutes after the lesson, if not immediately. And I have tested this theory, and it works equally well with teachers and learners. Neither the learners nor the teachers remember any of the language in busy work, course book exercises. So get the learners to perform not just the lower order thinking skills, the recognizing, listing, but also to create, to do some bigger time tasks, not just the small picture of analyzing language. Language encounters also have to do with the big picture. And be playful, give them challenging activities, show them appreciation, encourage them to be collaborative, funny, crazy, paradoxical, fun, but do it in a scaffolded way so that they feel safe, they can perform well. Scaffolding gives them confidence. Don't remove the confidence away from them. And make a difference, finally, by showing your appreciation, being patient, being tolerant, showing enthusiasm, modeling good learning behaviors yourself. Learn something. Being encouraging and believing that they can do it. And I think if you believe it firmly, they will. Thank you very much. I think I'm going to stop here. And if I may, I'll look at the questions. I'm going to stop sharing to see if anybody else wants to come on and talk to me. Thank you. I hope you found something useful in this talk. And thank you very much for remaining until the very end of this conference. You are to be commended, although some of you are my trainees, and I didn't say I wouldn't give you a good grade. I didn't say anything like that. Wasn't part of the deal. Thank you. Shall I deal with questions, Helen?
Yeah, that would be great. You've got about 10 minutes, and I think there are a few questions in the chat box.
All right, that's good.
In the chat, rather, in the Q&A box.
I didn't do too badly with time, because I had a lot of slides, and I thought, Joof, I'm not going to be able to finish them all. I started chopping things off. So nowadays, when everything Rashmi says is available online, how, as a teacher, can we make a difference and keeping a learner's interest intact in what we are teaching them formally as per the curriculum? I think you need to intervene. You need some interventions into your curriculum. Thank you so much to everyone who was here. I don't think that going through the book, the course book, Rashmi, is going to cut it so much with teenagers. If you have them with their nose stuck in a book, I think you really need to find ways, not of not fulfilling your objectives, but finding different ways of fulfilling your lesson or the objectives that you do actually have in your curriculum. But it's more work, I think, you know. I'm not saying it's less work, it's more work. So it's up to, you know, you really need to believe that you will make a difference. Sahar, with teenagers, I think, first of all, I don't have any specific strategies. I think every individual learner is a different case. Some of them may be having problems at home. Some of them may need individual attention. I think a good starting point is to start with some activities that generate a group, a team spirit in your learners. Thank you so much, Vicky. And this is why, although my talk was not about team building and group cohesion, I always start a teenage and any class, to be quite honest, with some activities that involve getting to know you, getting to be members of a team, creating the rules for the team. So, for example, if I want learners to be dressed in a certain way, or there are some class rules that we all have to obey, I have a lesson about creating a contract where they have to work out what to do. And I have to promise some things as well. I have to promise not to be boring and deliver sleep-inducing lessons. And they have to collaborate and, you know, we work out, negotiate. I think in general, although teenagers are not adults, they are developing into adulthood, but they're not yet adults. We can't treat them as adults, although this is what they would ultimately like. They think they're adults. So they think they know everything, perhaps. But they need to be able to trust you in order to display the fact that they don't know everything. And so if you are a kind of authoritarian teacher who knows everything, I don't think that will be a good idea. Sahar, if I train them to learn without needing me, what should I do then? You know, I'm not saying that you think you can do it overnight, Sahar. That's a good one. That's a tall order. If you train them not to need you, that would be the end of their course. You're training them to be autonomous after they finish their program. It wasn't intended. I wasn't intending to say that we don't need teachers. Is that how you took it? It wasn't the case. Anna, Milena, study privately because their parents want them to. Well, I think generally reasons for learning in a private situation would, I would do a needs analysis. I would ask the learner to define which topics interest them and which topics they want to display expertise in. I think every teenager has something that they like to do. Lots of music also, I think. Lyrics training is very popular with teen learners. I know most of you use it. Have lyrics trainings, competitions where he can compete against you and lose sometimes, please, don't always win. And so he can display that he's a good, he knows music, he can choose the material, ask him to choose materials as well. Not in every lesson, or for every stage of the lesson, but you could have a time aside in the lesson where the learner says, now what I would like to do is this. You might find that they will wait for that moment. I don't know if there are any other questions here. Patricia, regarding the pandemic. Even if the online, they find it hard to concentrate. I don't know. I think, the ideas that I suggested aim to do just that, Patricia. I don't know if they were not particularly useful. I think of not mentioning the pandemic at all is also, pretending that everything is roses. Is also not a good idea. I think we would need to deal with it. I would get them to discuss it. I would get them to, contribute, how they could contribute to the general well-being of their community, how to be more involved in maintaining a healthy lifestyle, how to protect themselves and their parents. So I think, if they're depressed because someone is dying in their family, you can't say, let's have a karaoke party. It's very inappropriate. So maybe we could discuss, you could on occasion discuss some of the issues raised about the pandemic. Any other questions? Oh yes, there's a couple more. Sahar says, my initiative is teaching with love. Don't we all teach with love? If the student loves the teacher, I think yeah. I think love is in the sense that it's very important to have a very positive relationship. It's a very, very important aspect, and it's more important than methodology, Sahar. If you do everything I said and you do it with a dour and sour face, it's not going to work. It is a work of the heart. Yes, I agree with you about this. Yeah, I think of the three factors that are related to what a teacher does, the personal one is the most significant. Whether our conference is about the technical maybe and the background knowledge, but we also need mindfulness. Other colleagues have mentioned, teaching mindfulness and teaching interpersonal communication, teaching the learners how to collaborate, and also being a good role model of collaboration and compassion, tolerance yourself is important. I think Tanzila, I think I discussed this answer with, it was exactly the same as Patricia's. Is that okay with you? I don't know if you're not satisfied with the answer or waiting for a different answer. Any other questions? Comments are welcome. I don't know who else is here. I think I'm done. We tend to say, Julie's saying, we tend to have strong bonds. Good rapport is absolutely an essential, yes. I have made those mistakes myself in my early career as a teacher, very young teacher. I was very bent on technique, and I think it was a mistake, and I paid for it. And it was a really, really harsh lesson that, I thought everything is about how well you plan your design. And it just woke up to the facts of life when I saw my first video of myself in a class, and there wasn't a smile on my face. The learners were killing themselves to give me some good answers, and all I would say was next. This was shocking, but I learned from this. I learned a really, really good lesson from this. You love teaching adolescents. I think they get very motivated, yes. I think that's about the end. Thank you very much, Helen. You're ready to wrap up this session. Thank you very much for hosting.
Thank you so much, Marisa. I was writing so many notes. I feel like you touched on so many useful areas for those of us who are teaching teenagers. Like, I could just go through all of my notes, but I'm sure everyone else has already been writing a lot of them. My personal favorite that I'm going to take away is the Super Learning Clinic, to help kind of guide our teenagers to develop strategies for learning and some self-awareness. So
I think as a teacher who has done courses, and some of the audience that I personally know, you have been exposed to tutorials with your tutors, and but we don't do those enough with classes. The individual tutorial thing is an important thing, and we really need to, give them self-access work to do half an hour and open your clinic. The doctor is in, I'm here to help.
That's great.
If anyone would like my slides, I will put them up on SlideShare, which I always do. And they're under my name. You can see a lot of other slides from other presentations, so you're very welcome to download them.
Thank you so much for everything you've shared today. So thank you very much, Marisa, and thank you, everyone. We're going to have a 5-minute break, and we're going to come back at 18:15 UTC. So thank you very much. See you then.